Captain Max Rigby stared out the viewport of the diplomatic shuttle as it descended toward the surface of Terrax 9, wondering not for the first time how he'd ended up here. 20 years in the diplomatic corps had taught him one thing. First contact was always a mess. Always. "Captain Rigby, we're approaching the landing zone," announced the pilot, her voice carrying the practiced calm of someone who had never watched negotiations dissolve into chaos. Lucky her. Max straightened his uniform and sighed. Right. Let's hope these Terraxians have a better sense of humor than the Proxima Centaurians. I still have nightmares about that incident with the ceremonial fruit. Lieutenant Tanner, the fresh-faced diplomatic aide assigned to Max, looked up from his tablet. Actually, sir, our xenobiologists believe the Terraxians evolved from apex predators. They're described as, He scrolled through his notes, bipedal reptiloids with enhanced olfactory capabilities and significant dentition. Significant dentition? Max repeated flatly, so they have big teeth. Wonderful. The shuttle touched down with a gentle thud, and Max took a deep breath. Showtime. As the ramp lowered, the diplomatic team was hit by the planet's atmosphere, hot, humid, and thick with the scent of alien vegetation. Max led the procession, followed by Tanner and 3 other aides carrying the traditional gifts of Earth, artwork, music recordings, and of course chocolate. Chocolate had saved more diplomatic missions than Max cared to admit. The Terraxian welcoming party stood in formation, 7 feet of scaled muscle, clawed hands, and yes, significant dentition. Their leader, identifiable by elaborate markings on his scales, stepped forward. "I am Gregstar, Speaker for the High Council of Terrax," the alien said through the translator. His voice carried a rumbling quality that made Max think of avalanches. Max performed the formal bow. "Captain Maxwell Rigby, representing the United Earth Alliance. We come in peace and friendship." The standard diplomatic script called for exchange of formal pleasantries next, but instead, Gregstar moved closer, much closer than protocol suggested. The Terraxian leader leaned down, his elongated snout inches from Max's face. Behind him, Max could hear Tanner's sharp intake of breath. Gregstar's vertical pupils narrowed as they locked with Max's eyes. Then, something unexpected happened. The alien's posture changed, relaxed even, and the translator captured what sounded suspiciously like a chuckle. "You have seen death, haven't you, Captain Rigby?" Gregstar said, his voice lower now. Max didn't blink. 15 years ago, a diplomatic mission to a mining colony had gone terribly wrong. 3 days trapped in a collapsed tunnel with dwindling oxygen and 2 dead colleagues. Yeah, he'd seen death. "I've had my moments," Max replied evenly. Gregstar's mouth, filled with those impressive teeth, stretched into what might have been a smile. "Good. Then we understand each other. Come. The feast awaits." As the Terraxian turned away, Max caught Tanner's bewildered expression. "Sir," the lieutenant whispered urgently, "that's not in the protocol guide." Max shrugged. "Welcome to diplomacy, kid. First rule, the protocol guide is always wrong. The negotiations were supposed to be straightforward, establish trade, set up cultural exchange programs, the usual first contact material. But from the moment Max and his team entered the Grand Chamber, something was off. For starters, the Terraxian negotiators couldn't stop staring at Max, not at Tanner, not at the other aides, just Max. Every time he spoke, their attention intensified, those vertical pupils dilating in what the xenobiologists would later describe as predatory focus. "As I was saying," Max continued, trying to ignore the unnerving attention, "Earth can offer advanced medical technology in exchange for access to your planet's unique mineral deposits." "Grex," they interrupted, turning to one of his advisors. "This one has the eyes of a hunter. See how he watches the exits." Max hadn't realized he was doing that. Old habits. By midday, Dr. Elara Voss had arrived from the orbiting research vessel. Unlike Max's diplomatic blandness, Dr. Voss was all sharp angles and sharper intellect, with short cropped hair and eyes that missed nothing. She was ostensibly there to discuss scientific cooperation, but Max knew a babysitter when he saw one. "They've been watching you all morning," she murmured during a brief recess, not just looking tracking. The way predators track potential threats. Threatening. Me, Max said, feigning offense. I'm the picture of diplomatic charm. It's not just you, Voss continued, ignoring his sarcasm. I'd been watching the recordings from your arrival. When you made eye contact with Grextar, something changed. It was like recognition. Before Max could respond, they were called back for the afternoon session. This time, other alien species were present, representatives from the galactic community observing the new contact. Most notably were the Floraxians, herbivorous plant-like beings known for their pacifism, and the Trill, small mammalian traders who specialized in luxury goods. Dinner was served, a diplomatic necessity that Max usually dreaded. The food was always bizarre, the conversation stilted, and someone invariably committed a cultural faux pas that set negotiations back by weeks. Tonight did not disappoint. Max was seated at the head table with Grextar, while the other delegations were dispersed throughout the grand hall. Everything was going smoothly until dessert, when Grextar leaned over to Max. "Tell me, Captain," the Terraxian said, his voice a low rumble. "Have you ever hunted?" Before Max could formulate a diplomatically acceptable answer, Grextar's hand shot out, faster than Max would have thought possible, and snatched a small flying insect from the air. The Terraxian's jaws opened, revealing those impressive teeth, and with a snap the insect was gone. "Apologies," Grextar said, not sounding particularly sorry. Instinct. That's when Max noticed the Floraxian representative across the room, trembling so hard their leaf-like appendages were rustling audibly. The Trill representatives weren't much better, huddled together at their table, whiskers twitching in alarm. Then it happened. A Terraxian server, carrying a tray of drinks, tripped. The crash echoed through the hall, and every Terraxian in the room, including Grextar, whipped around toward the sound, jaws open in instinctive threat displays. The Floraxian delegate screamed a high, keening sound like wind through bamboo and fainted dead away. The Trill representatives bolted for the exits, knocking over chairs and tables in their panic. In the chaos that followed, Max remained seated, calmly sipping his drink. When he looked up, he found Grextar watching him with what could only be described as approval. "You didn't run," the Terraxian noted. Max shrugged. "I've been to budget meetings that were scarier." Later that night, as Max was preparing for bed in his diplomatic quarters, a message arrived from the Galactic Embassy. 7 different species, all apex predators on their respective worlds, were requesting Max's presence at an upcoming summit. Dr. Voss, reading over his shoulder, raised an eyebrow. "Well, Captain, it seems you've made quite an impression." "It's in the eyes," Dr. Voss declared the next morning, pacing the small conference room aboard their ship where Max and his team had gathered. "Something about human eyes triggers recognition in apex predator species." Max slouched in his chair, nursing his 3rd cup of coffee. "That's ridiculous. We're omnivores, not apex predators." Dr. Voss pulled up a holographic display. "Technically, humans occupy a strange evolutionary niche. We're persistence hunters. Our ancestors chased prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. Predator species rely on ambush or short bursts of speed. So I'm getting dinner invitations because I can run a marathon?" Max asked skeptically. "More than that," Voss continued, her enthusiasm building. "It's about the gaze. Predator species across the galaxy have developed forward-facing eyes with binocular vision. It's an evolutionary marker for hunting capability." Lieutenant Tanner frowned. "But many species have forward-facing eyes." "Yes, but combined with our frontal cortex development and the whites of our eyes, which is surprisingly rare, we broadcast our intentions. We're predators who advertise our next move. Take out or so. Anyway." The ship's AI chimed in, its voice coming from speakers embedded in the ceiling. "If I may interject, the historical records do show numerous instances of humans forming unusual bonds with Earth predators. Ancient humans domesticated wolves despite their predatory nature, creating what became known as dogs." "Thank you, Dave," Max said dryly. Very helpful. You're welcome, Captain, the AI responded, missing the sarcasm entirely. I have 347 more examples of human-predator interactions if you would like to hear them. Hard pass, Max muttered. Dr. Voss brought the conversation back to the matter at hand. Captain, what was going through your mind when Grexter stared you down yesterday? Max hesitated. He didn't like talking about the mining accident. 3 days trapped in darkness, conserving oxygen, waiting for rescue that almost came too late. He remembered staring down a cave scorpion that had somehow survived the collapse, both of them too weak to do anything but acknowledge each other's existence. Nothing diplomatic, he admitted finally. Just survival instinct. Voss nodded excitedly. That's it. These apex species aren't seeing diplomatic training. They're recognizing a fellow predator, someone who understands the thin line between life and death. Max rubbed his temples. So what are you suggesting? That I attend this summit and what? Of staring contests with the most dangerous beings in the galaxy? It could be our greatest diplomatic opportunity yet, Voss argued. No human has ever been invited to this kind of gathering. Or, Max countered, it could be 7 different ways to get eaten. Dave chimed in again. Historical precedent suggests a 73% chance of diplomatic success, with only a 27% chance of being consumed. Those are terrible odds, Tanner exclaimed. Actually, Dave continued helpfully, for first contact scenarios, that's quite promising. Would you like me to calculate the probability of dismemberment separately from consumption? No, everyone shouted in unison. Max stood up. Decision made. Fine. I'll go to this summit, but if I get eaten, I'm putting in for hazard pay posthumously. The Galactic Summit for Apex Species representatives took place on a neutral space station orbiting an uninhabited gas giant. As Max's shuttle docked, Dr. Voss gave him one last briefing. Remember, no sudden movements. Don't show fear, they can smell it, and for God's sake, don't bare your teeth unless you're prepared to fight. So, no smiling, Max said. That'll be easy. I haven't had anything to smile about since I was assigned to this mission. The summit chamber was a marvel of xenobiological accommodation. Temperature, atmosphere, and gravity varied throughout the room to suit the needs of each delegation. As Max entered, 7 pairs of predatory eyes swiveled to track him. The Terraxians were there, of course. Beside them stood the Vorax, wolf-like beings with crystalline fur that refracted light into dazzling patterns. In the low-gravity section floated the Mimosine, tentacled hunters from a gas giant ocean, each species more alien than the last, but all sharing one trait: they were the unchallenged killers of their worlds. And then Max spotted something unexpected: another human. Vernon Price, the diplomatic golden boy who had been fast-tracked through the Corps based on his flawless academic record and political connections. Unlike Max's weathered appearance, Price was the picture of polished professionalism. Rigby. Price nodded stiffly. I see they dragged you into this circus as well. The secretary thought having 2 human representatives might be prudent. Before Max could respond, the proceedings began. A Vorax stepped forward, its crystalline fur catching the light. The summit of the 7 hunters welcomes the human representatives, it announced, voice melodious despite the predatory gleam in its eyes. We will now begin the recognition ceremony. What followed was the strangest diplomatic event of Max's career. Each apex species performed what appeared to be hunting demonstrations, stylized movements showing how they tracked, captured, and consumed prey on their homeworlds. After each demonstration, the species representative approached the human delegation. When the first predator, a massive Vorax, approached, it bypassed Vernon Price completely and stopped in front of Max. The wolf-like alien leaned in, its eyes locking with Max's. Something passed between them, an unspoken acknowledgement. This one, the Vorax said simply, before moving on. The pattern repeated with each species. The Mimosine extended a tentacle not toward Price, but to Max. The gelatinous flocks oozed closer to Max than to Price. One by one they chose Max, ignoring the diplomat who had literally written the book on first contact protocol. Price's face flushed with indignation. What exactly is happening here? I am the official representative of Earth's diplomatic corps. Grextar, the Terraxian leader, tilted his head curiously. Your eyes are empty. You have never faced death. I beg your pardon. Price spluttered. That's when Max understood. He stepped forward and met Grextar's gaze directly. No diplomatic pretense, no carefully constructed facade. Just the raw, honest look of someone who had stared into the abyss and walked away changed. Grextar's vertical pupils dilated. Yes, this is the one who understands. The summit chamber fell silent. Then, from the darkest corner, a new figure emerged, larger than the Terraxians, with obsidian scales and eyes like molten gold. This creature moved with lethal grace. The other predator species shifted subtly, creating space. I am Kral, the newcomer announced, voice like gravel across steel, supreme hunter of the Draconis Nebula. And I challenge the human to the right of Kael Thar. Vernon Price, desperately trying to salvage his diplomatic mission, stepped forward. As Earth's representative, I accept. Not you, Kral interrupted. Him. A clawed finger pointed directly at Max. As murmurs spread through the chamber, Max caught Dr. Voss mouthing something from the observation deck. It looks suspiciously like "Don't you dare." Max sighed. What exactly does this right entail? Kral's mouth stretched into something approximating a smile, revealing teeth that could shear through battle armor. Why, a hunt, of course. The preparation chamber was Spartan, just a bench, a water dispenser, and a weapons rack filled with implements that looked more like torture devices than hunting tools. Max sat on the bench, trying to look more confident than he felt. Dr. Voss paced frantically. This is madness. The Kael Thar is an ancient hunting ritual. No non-Draconian has ever participated, let alone survived. Thank you for that vote of confidence, Max replied dryly. Dave's voice came through Max's communicator. I've analyzed the available data on Draconian hunting practices. Their preferred method involves disembowelment followed by consumption of the still-living preys. That's enough, Dave, Max interrupted hastily. Would you prefer information on their secondary hunting technique? It involves paralyzing toxins that... Dave. Acknowledged. The AI responded, somehow managing to sound disappointed. Dr. Voss stopped pacing long enough to hand Max a small device. This is a subdermal emergency beacon. If things go south, press it, and we'll extract you, somehow. The door slid open, and Grexter entered. The Terraxian looked almost concerned, which did nothing for Max's confidence. The Kael Thar begins in 10 of your Earth minutes, Grexter announced. Choose your weapon. Max approached the rack, examining the alien implements, serrated blades, projectile weapons that fired poisoned darts, energy weapons that could melt through steel, all designed for species with very different anatomies than his own. What exactly am I hunting? Max asked. Grextar's expression was unreadable. It is not what you will hunt, but what hunts you. Of course it is, Max muttered. Because nothing in my life can ever be simple. As Max considered his options, he thought back to his survival training. Humans weren't the strongest, fastest, or most lethal species on Earth. They survived through adaptability, endurance, and perhaps most importantly, cooperation. An idea began to form. I choose no weapon, Max declared. Dr. Voss made a strangled noise. Are you insane? Grexter tilted his head. You face Kral unarmed? This is unexpected. Max met the Terraxian's gaze steadily. Humans didn't become what we are through raw strength. We survived by understanding. When Max entered the arena, a massive biodome designed to simulate Kral's native hunting grounds, he was empty-handed. The landscape was alien and hostile, twisted vegetation in shades of purple and black, terrain that shifted from swamp to jagged rock formations, all under a crimson artificial sky. Somewhere in this nightmare landscape, Kral was hunting him. Max closed his eyes briefly, recalling his survival training. First priority, assess the environment. Second, find water. Third, locate shelter. He began moving, carefully navigating the treacherous terrain. Years of diplomatic missions to hostile environments had taught him to read landscapes. That formation would provide visibility, as plants likely indicated water nearby. The way the vegetation moved suggested wind patterns or the movement of a very large predator. For an hour, Max evaded rather than confronted. He found water, identified edible plants, according to his scanner, and created false trails. All the while, he sensed Creel's presence, always just out of sight. The predator was toying with him. Finally, in a clearing surrounded by twisted black trees, Max stopped running. "I know you're there," he called out. "Let's talk." "Inkaye," assisted. Creel emerged from the shadows, moving with impossible silence for something so large. "Talk. This is a hunt, not a negotiation." "Everything's a negotiation," Max replied, not backing down. That's what humans learned. We weren't the strongest or the fastest, but we understood something fundamental about survival. But Creel circled him, golden eyes never blinking. "And what is that?" "The most successful predators don't just kill, they adapt. They learn. They recognize when the rules need to change." Max took a deliberate step forward, meeting Creel's gaze directly. "You didn't bring me here to kill me. You could have done that any time. You brought me here to understand what makes humans different. Why we, soft-skinned omnivores that we are, managed to become the dominant species on our world." For a long moment, Creel was motionless. Then, incredibly, the massive predator sat down. "Continue," Creel rumbled. When Max walked out of the arena 3 hours later, the assembled delegations fell silent. He was dirty, scratched, and limping slightly, but very much alive. More surprisingly, Creel walked beside him, not as captor but as equal. Dr. Voss rushed forward. "Captain, you're alive. How did you?" "We had a chat," Max said simply. Vernon Price pushed his way to the front of the crowd. "What happened in there? What kind of diplomatic precedent have you set?" Creel's rumbling voice silenced the chatter. "The human has passed the KL Thar, not by killing, but by understanding." Grexter stepped forward. "Explain." "For millennia we have judged strength by the ability to destroy," Creel continued. "But true apex predators know when to adapt. Humans became dominant on their world not through superior strength, but through cooperation and adaptation." Max shrugged modestly. "I just pointed out that lone hunters eventually starve, while packs thrive. Even the most dangerous predator benefits from allies." "The right of KL Thar is not about killing prey," Creel revealed, to the shock of many present. "It is about proving wisdom worthy of a true hunter. Captain Rigby demonstrated that wisdom by refusing to engage in a battle he could not win through force alone." Price looked bewildered. "So you just talked your way out of being eaten?" "It's called diplomacy," Max replied with a hint of smugness. "You might want to try it sometime." The Galactic Treaty was signed the following day. Earth gained access to unprecedented resources and technology in exchange for cultural and scientific exchange programs. But there was one unusual clause that the official records listed simply as the Predator's Clause. In private, the clause stipulated that all future diplomatic missions to apex predator worlds would include at least one human who had seen the edge, someone who had faced death and returned, carrying that experience in their eyes. 3 months later, Max found himself standing in the Secretary's office back on Earth. "Congratulations, Rigby," the Secretary said, not looking up from her screens. "Your unorthodox approach has revolutionized our diplomatic relations with 7 major powers. The Predator's Clause is now standard in all our treaties." "Thank you, man," Max replied cautiously, sensing a but coming. "Which is why," she continued, "you're being promoted to head of interspecies diplomatic relations." Max blinked. "I'm what?" "Don't look so shocked. It turns out having someone who can stare down the galaxy's most dangerous life forms without flinching is an asset." She finally looked up. "Unless you'd prefer to go back to negotiating carbon emission treaties with the Martian colonies." No, ma'am, Max said quickly. But I have to ask what happens when we meet a species that doesn't respond to the predator thing. The secretary's smile was just a touch predatory itself. That's why we still keep diplomats like Price around, with different tools for different jobs. As Max left the office, his communicator buzzed with a message from Dr. Voss. Guess what? The Floraxians want to meet you now. Apparently, word has spread that you're a gentle predator. Whatever that means. Max laughed. Of all the diplomatic titles he'd held, gentle predator might be the most accurate. In the reflection of a window, he caught sight of his own eyes, the eyes that apex predators across the galaxy somehow recognized as kindred. Not because humans were the most lethal hunters, but because they understood something fundamental about survival that even the galaxy's most dangerous predators were only beginning to learn. Adaptability trumps ferocity every time. At that, and knowing when not to bare your teeth at dinner.